Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, after the NFL draft, we have been left with a ridiculous number of NFL backfields that are just confusing. They leave us scratching our head. I mean, how is this backfield going to operate? Who's going to be the 1A and the 1B? Who's going to be pushed to the bench? Who's going to be starting? Who's going to be the workhorse? There's so many question marks with a lot of backfields now that I feel like it's very important for me to do a video kind of clearing up what is going on with these backfields and how we're going to value the running backs because, these teams are really going to a platoon offense, a split backfield a lot more often. So I want to help you guys kind of navigate these backfields and figure out what the running back outlook is in each of these backfields coming into this season and, how we're going to value the running backs and we're going to take them in the draft and everything like that. So I am going to go in order from least confusing backfield to most confusing backfields. Now, I have 10 backfields on this list that I think I need to really address because they really just leave us scratching our head. So they're all a little bit weird. They're all kind of a mess. That's why they're on the list. But I'm going to go from least confusing to just absolute mess of a backfield and go in that order. So I'm going to start right here with my number 10, and that is the Carolina Panthers. Now, Miles Sanders gets signed to the Panthers. Last year, he had 1,200 plus rushing yards, 4.9 yards per carry, 11 rushing touchdowns, a very efficient season for Miles Sanders. He really kind of proved himself as an NFL running back. With that being said, he was running behind an incredible offensive line. He had an incredible rushing quarterback to take a lot of the defensive attention off him. Will he be as efficient in Carolina? I highly doubt it. Okay, if he ran the ball for 4.9 yards per carry behind that offensive line, I think we're going to see the efficiency numbers really go down, like significantly this year. I don't think he's going to be as efficient as a running back. I don't think he's going to have nearly the scoring upside. In fact, I know he's not going to have nearly the scoring upside. We're looking at polar opposites as far as quality of offense. We go from one of the best offenses in the NFL to one of the worst offenses in the NFL. I do not trust Miles Sanders to have a good fantasy season. And so I think we're going to want to fade him in the draft. Okay. And obviously we got Chuba Hubbard running behind him. Chuba Hubbard has not proven anything as an NFL running back. So even if Miles Sanders happened to get hurt and Chuba Hubbard came in and took over the backfield, he still just hasn't really proven anything as an NFL running back and hasn't proven to put up good fantasy numbers, even when getting to have the starting workhorse role. So I don't like this Carolina backfield whatsoever. Miles Sanders will get to be a workhorse and a true three-down back, but there's not going to be any efficiency and there's not going to be any touchdown upside. I don't like this backfield. Stay away from both running backs. Next on my list is going to be the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins, we've got a very talented Raheem Mostert, a pretty talented Jeff Wilson as well. This is actually a pretty good backfield, okay? Who's going to be the 1A? Who's going to be the 1B? We don't know. Look, Raheem Mostert has averaged 5.4 yards a carry in his career. So for a 300-plus carry sample size, this dude is one of the most efficient running backs of all time. It's just, he's been hurt a lot in his career. So, can he stay healthy? We don't know. It was good to see him play a full healthy season this last year. I think he's going to be the 1A in the offense. Okay, he's the more talented running back than Jeff Wilson Jr. at the end of the day. At the end of the day, they both received pretty similar amount of red zone touches. We had 27 red zone touches for Mostert last year, 32 red zone touches for Jeff Wilson Jr. So they're very similar as far as the allotted workload that they get when they're in the red zone. And the only thing that Jeff Wilson really has on Raheem Mostert is he is 4 years younger than Raheem Mostert. So, that could propel him into taking the starting job and being the 1A and Raheem Mostert the 1B. But I think it's a lot more likely that we've got a 1A in Raheem Mostert and a 1B in Jeff Wilson Jr. With that being said, they're so close that I think what we're going to want to do in these fantasy drafts coming up is just take both running backs. Okay. If you're going to take Mostert, take Wilson and vice versa. If you're going to, you know what I mean? So take both running backs because either one could end up being the 1A or the 1B, and you don't want to end up with the 1B. Considering the fact that you're taking these running backs in the later rounds anyway, it's not like you're having to waste, early picks going back-to-back running backs in the same offense. It's probably going to be something like your 10th pick overall and your 11th pick overall. Big deal. If you're going to get one running back, you should definitely get the other. Next on my list is going to be the Washington Commanders. Now, this is a team who has been an absolute mess as far as their offensive line over the past couple of years. Because of this, the yards per carry efficiency for the running backs have been very bad. Antonio Gibson, a guy who is a talented running back, only 4.1 yards per carry in his career because he's been running behind an injured offensive line. Brian Robinson comes in and takes over the running back one role for the offense last year, only 3.9 yards per carry. The yards per carry efficiency for these running backs in this backfield has been terrible. Now, can this offensive line be decent if they stay healthy? Yes, they could be decent, but they don't really have that high of a ceiling as far as, the offensive line isn't going to be like amazing or anything like that. They're going to be decent at best. And there's certainly a chance that they come out and are injury prone and are just absolutely terrible again. So I don't trust either of these running backs. We've obviously got a very talented running back in Antonio Gibson, a talented running back in Brian Robinson, but the offensive line is a serious problem. We don't know if the offense is going to be efficient whatsoever. I would go ahead and fade both these running backs. Next backfield on my list is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles brought in DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift, a very efficient running back in his young career, 6.3 yards per touch last year, 8.1% breakaway run rate. This dude, he's hyper efficient, but for whatever reason, the Lions would not allow him to be an elite fantasy running back. They always had some sort of running back running behind him that was taking all his production. Last year, we had Jamal Williams take all of his touchdowns. Jamal Williams is a backup, leads the league in rushing touchdowns with 17. They absolutely ruined DeAndre Swift because of this, and so that took away all his upside. With that being said, I don't think the Eagles are going to necessarily give him that same treatment. I think that DeAndre Swift will see a healthy target share in the red zone, a healthy opportunity share, a healthy rushing count, everything like that. We've got him now running behind arguably the best offensive line in the entire league in the Philadelphia Eagles. So if this dude could be efficient running behind the Lions offensive line, the Eagles offensive line is probably even better. So, he's going to be hyper efficient once again. He's going to have tons of touchdown scoring opportunities because of playing in a hyper efficient offense and because of having a quarterback that draws a lot of defensive attention off him. I love DeAndre Swift this year. I think he has the potential to break out. And let's keep in mind that Rashad Penny running behind him can never finish a fantasy season. He's hurt all the time. So, if Rashad Penny gets hurt, DeAndre Swift is going to get to be more of like a 3-down back. And, we'll see some of Kenneth Gainwell. But if Penny gets hurt like he does, he gets hurt relatively often. DeAndre Swift could be a 3-down back in this offense. And at that point, he has extreme fantasy upside. But even before Rashad Penny gets injured, even if Rashad Penny happens to stay on the field, DeAndre Swift is the number one back in the backfield. And considering how good this offense is and how talented DeAndre Swift is, I actually love him to have a good fantasy season. I think that DeAndre Swift is a good running back to draft for fantasy. But don't take him too high because he is still technically in a split backfield. Next backfield on my list is going to be the Jets. Now, obviously, we've got a running back in Breece Hall who is hyper efficient. 6.9 yards per touch last year. This is first in the NFL. 11.3% breakaway run rate. This is a guy who he probably would have been the running back one in all of fantasy if he did not get hurt. And that's with starting the season with the first 3 weeks, he was still running behind Michael Carter Jr. for whatever reason. The team was easing him into things. But he comes out and, tears his ACL well before the season is over. And this was just absolutely a devastating injury to a lot of fantasy rosters. I know that he pretty much absolutely ruined one of my teams because I was really starting to lean on him as my best running back, and then he gets hurt. And it was a massive disappointment to a lot of fantasy owners. I'm still kind of pissed off about the situation, but let's hope that he can stay healthy this year. Now, what we do know is that running backs coming back from a torn ACL are very often not 100% until 2 years after their major injury. So this can be a problem. With that being said, there's also the chance that you get a Breece Hall discount because of people worried about this injury concern. So if this player slips to the 3rd or 4th round in the draft, we're getting a player who has the upside to be the running back one in all of fantasy in the 3rd or 4th round. So that's the flip side of it. Now, will he stay healthy? Only time will tell. But the ceiling is tremendously high. If he slips to the 3rd or 4th round, I don't mind taking a gamble on him. I'll draft guys like Isaiah Pacheco in the middle rounds to kind of have my back in case Breece Hall gets hurt. And that way I still have some good running backs to plug in. So I don't mind taking a shot on the Breece Hall ceiling. Just know that it is definitely a little bit of a risk. Michael Carter Jr. has been pretty much pushed completely to the bench. Is Israel A going to come in this year and get, a healthy workload? Well, he's the number 2 running back on the depth chart now. So, I think that it's possible that he sees a healthy workload at least to start the season because they're probably going to want to ease Breece Hall into things. That being said, I don't really think he's worth a pick in fantasy drafts. But, if you want to pick him just to, kind of have him as the backup because, Breece Hall can end up getting hurt, I can understand that. But let's draft Breece Hall in the 3rd or 4th round if he slips. Next backfield on my list is going to be the Detroit Lions. Now, the composition of the backfield has completely changed. We have 2 completely different running backs. I know that the Jahmyr Gibbs pick surprised a lot of us, but we've got a tremendously talented Jahmyr Gibbs who is now the number 1 running back in this backfield. He's 5'9", 200 pounds. So the only problem with his smaller stature is the fact that David Montgomery, the bigger, more well-built back, in the offense is probably going to give him the Jamal Williams treatment that Jamal Williams gave DeAndre Swift last season. He's going to come in, he's going to take all of his rushing touchdowns. This is the problem. We've got a 5'11", 225 David Montgomery who is significantly bigger in stature than Jahmyr Gibbs. So despite the fact that, David Montgomery only ran the ball for 4 yards per carry last year, look, he's going to come in and he is going to siphon all Jahmyr Gibbs' rushing touchdowns. So Jahmyr Gibbs might get some red zone work, but look for David Montgomery to literally get 75% to 80% of the red zone touches in this backfield. He is going to dominate the overall touchdowns. This severely caps Jahmyr Gibbs' ceiling. And so, when it comes to this backfield, it's just really tough because Montgomery should score more touchdowns, but Gibbs has higher pass catching upside, higher efficiency upside, and higher overall yardage total upside. So it's really a toss-up between these two running backs. In my personal opinion, I'm not going to touch either of them because I think it's just too unpredictable on a weekly basis which running back goes off, and I don't want to have the headache of drafting both the running backs because you've got to take both of these guys in the middle rounds. So and Jahmyr Gibbs might even be slipping to not slipping, but moving up to an earlier pick. So I just really don't want to touch either running back in this backfield. Next on my list is going to be the Seahawks. Now, Charbonnet comes in and just rains on the Kenneth Walker parade. We've got a Kenneth Walker who's fast as lightning, runs a 4.38, tremendous big playability. We think that he's just going to come in and easily be a top 5 running back this coming season. And then Charbonnet gets drafted to the Seahawks. From a real-world perspective, this was a very good move for the Seahawks. The Seahawks are absolutely now loaded on offense. But with that being the case, it is an absolute mess. It is just really bad as far as fantasy is concerned for Kenneth Walker. This is a guy who I had as the running back 3 going into the season. I now have him as my running back 13. I still think that he has a pretty tremendously high weekly ceiling due to being a very talented running back and what's going to be a very good offense. But Charbonnet is going to significantly cut into his season-long fantasy upside. So, unless Kenneth Walker slips to well into the middle rounds, I really don't want to touch him. This backfield is very odd to me because I just don't understand why. I mean, I guess I understand why they, most teams want to operate with a split backfield now because they know it's more efficient. But if I have a running back as good as Kenneth Walker, I'm not touching a running back in the draft, But the Seahawks decided to take Charbonnet, and they're pretty much going to ruin each other's fantasy upside. So, to be honest, I wouldn't draft either of these guys. Next on my list is going to be the Chicago Bears. Now, this is a very odd backfield. We had a Khalil Herbert that was significantly more efficient than David Montgomery last season, okay? But D'Onta Foreman comes in and is listed as the number 1 running back on the depth chart. D'Onta Foreman was pretty good for Carolina last year, but really only displayed a high ceiling in 1 game. With that being said, he's now going over to an offense that's certainly going to be better than the Carolina offense was last year. The Bears took an offensive lineman with their first pick. They bolstered up the offensive line as I knew they would. And they have Justin Fields to lead the offense. We now have a true wide receiver 1 in DJ Moore. I actually like this Bears offense this coming season, believe it or not. So I think that these running backs actually have some upside. But the problem is, who in the world is the starting running back for this team? I mean, it's very much up in the air. So D'Onta Foreman listed as a starting running back. But as efficient as Khalil Herbert has been in recent years when he gets his opportunities, why is D'Onta Foreman the starting running back? I don't know. I don't know that he's necessarily going to keep the 1A role all season. I could easily see Khalil Herbert taking that from him. So, but we don't know that that's going to happen. That's why this backfield is very confusing. But the good thing about these running backs is you can take them in the later rounds. So I actually don't mind drafting either of them because if either one of these running backs ends up getting to take over the starting role and gets to actually become a 3-down back and not operate in a split backfield, they could have some pretty tremendously high fantasy upside because, teams are going to be worried about stopping Justin Fields, and this is going to open up bigger running lanes for these running backs. And Khalil Herbert showed to be efficient even with a bad offensive line. Now we have an improved offensive line. If Khalil Herbert comes in and is the starting workhorse running back for this offense at any point in the season, he has some pretty darn good upside. So considering the fact that you could take him and D'Onta Foreman in the later rounds, I don't mind taking a shot at these guys because there's actually some potential here. So that's how we're going to want to navigate the Bears backfield. As far as who you take in the draft in the later rounds, I would favor Khalil Herbert actually because I think he'll probably take over more of the starting role as the season progresses. Next backfield on my list. This is a backfield that's been making me mad for years, and that is the Green Bay Packers. Now, obviously, we lose Aaron Rodgers, right? But we've got a running back in Aaron Jones who 5.1 yards per carry in his career, 5.3 yards per carry last year. This dude's been hyper efficient. He's been one of the better running backs in the NFL for quite some time. 3.28 yards created per touch last year. This is top 10 in the NFL. That means, how many yards he creates after what the offensive line gives him. After he bounces off that first tackle, how many yards does he get? 3.28 yards per touch as far as his yards created. That's incredibly impressive yards created per touch. This dude, 38 red zone touches last year to A.J. Dillon's 28. So despite the fact that, it seems like A.J. Dillon was kind of taking over as the red zone back, when you really look at the numbers, Aaron Jones still saw significantly more work in the red zone than A.J. Dillon. I think this is going to continue to be the case. But this offense, they tend to be very random, right, in how they operate their backfield. There are weeks where Aaron Jones outcarries A.J. Dillon significantly. And then there's weeks where A.J. Dillon outcarries Aaron Jones significantly. And then there's weeks where Aaron Jones seems like he's going to be the only running back that's used in the red zone. And then there's weeks where A.J. Dillon is dominating the red zone opportunity share 70% to 30%, and he's getting all the targets within the red zone. So it's just very odd. There's no particular pattern to this backfield. That's why it's extremely hard to navigate this backfield, because we just don't know what Matt LaFleur is going to do. We don't know how they're going to run this backfield. And now we don't have a very good, quarterback to lead the offense. So, is Jordan Love going to step in and lead an efficient offense? Maybe. I mean, it's possible. I definitely think that he can, but there's no guarantee there. And, so what's the touchdown upside going to be like for Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon? I don't think it's necessarily going to be as high as when Aaron Rodgers was there, but I think that they will find the end zone. Probably more often than people think, but the problem is which running back is going to find the end zone, right? Is it going to be Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon? We don't know, because there's no real particular pattern to how they use these guys on a weekly basis. It makes both players very boom or bust. So to invest any sort of draft capital in either of these guys just doesn't really make sense to me. In fact, if I had to take one running back, I think I might favor A.J. Dillon this year. I can't talk today. I favor A.J. Dillon, or I favor Aaron Jones. I favor Aaron Jones as far as a talent perspective, right? But when it comes down to it, they're starting to give A.J. Dillon just as much work in this backfield. So I really want most people to just fade Aaron Jones in the earlier rounds, because he's just very boom or bust due to the random nature of how they run this backfield. So it's a very confusing backfield. It's a very annoying backfield, but I think we're going to want to fade drafting Aaron Jones and investing too much draft capital in him, and maybe just going with A.J. Dillon this year. Next backfield on my list, the most confusing backfield, the most ridiculous backfield that we have to deal with this year is the New Orleans Saints. We've got Alvin Kamara, who has been one of the best fantasy running backs that we've really ever seen. And last year, for whatever reason, the efficiency and the volume was down. The amount of red zone touches he was getting was very inconsistent. So, a lot of times when they get in the red zone, what are they going to do, right? They get Jamal Williams, right? Because, we've got a Kamara who's facing a potential 6-game suspension. We've got a Kamara who, is he on the decline? I personally don't think so, but there's some people that think he's on the decline. Jamal Williams, 17 touchdowns last year, led the league in rushing touchdowns as a backup running back. This is very concerning to me. When the team gets in the red zone, are they going to let Jamal Williams siphon away all of Alvin Kamara's touchdown upside? This could be a very serious problem, but I don't know that that's going to happen. I think that they might have signed Jamal Williams just in case Kamara is suspended for 6 games, and then when Kamara comes back, Jamal Williams might not do that much. That could very well be the case, because it's Alvin freaking Kamara, right? But at the same time, Jamal Williams, no matter where he's gone in his career, has significantly hindered the running back running in front of him, because he's always shown to be very talented, and he's always shown to get a lot of the workload in the backfield, especially touches within the red zone. So Alvin Kamara could be fine when he comes back from his suspension. He could not be suspended at all. He could, be absolutely terrible because Jamal Williams siphons all of his rushing touchdowns. There's just so many question marks in this backfield. I wouldn't invest any sort of draft capital in Alvin Kamara. There's way too many red flags. And he's going to be drafted high because of the name and because he still technically has a high ceiling if everything works out perfectly. But with all these negative things and all these red flags, odds are at least one of these things causes Alvin Kamara to be a bust. So I wouldn't touch him in the draft. What I would do is wait a little bit and take Jamal Williams, because in the games that Alvin Kamara doesn't play, Jamal Williams can come out and just be an absolutely dominant fantasy weapon because, he's a talented back. Okay, this team gets Derek Carr. Their offense has some upside, so Jamal Williams will have some touchdown upside. And even when Kamara comes back from the suspension that I think most of us think that he will have, Jamal Williams has the chance to siphon a lot of, Alvin Kamara's rushing touchdowns away from him. So I think it's best to actually fade Kamara early and just draft Jamal Williams. So that's how we're going to want to address these backfields. All right, guys. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of clear things up. As far as these backfields are concerned, these are my, top 10 most just ridiculous backfields in the entire NFL. They're, they're leaving us scratching our head. Like, what are we going to do with these guys, right? So I wanted to give you all my breakdown on, how these backfields are going to operate. That way you can kind of have an idea of how to value the running backs. All right, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. Catch you later.